Hello and welcome to another developer diary. So it's been a while since the last update, so there's a bunch of cool new things to be showing off, and the game is getting very close to release. Has taken a bit longer than expected, actually probably a fair bit longer than expected. It was a much larger game than anticipated, and also being a lot busier with everything else as well than expected, so it has sort of run over a lot more than intended. Future ones are going to be much smaller in scale. So, looking at a couple of things, there's some pretty obvious additions here in terms of there is weather that is now happening, and there are also events. And I'll start us actually moving. So the event system is fully in place. So the way things work is the game has different seasons. So you progress through those seasons. As those seasons occur, it then also will go and kick off sort of different events. So if we go and take a look at where we've got all this set up, we have our season manager. So we've got different seasons. Each season defines the events that can actually happen. So we have different ones here, so there's a range of different ones. I was originally going to have some ones that could potentially cause damage to the train, but that's actually a feature that I've cut from it, of supporting being able to have damage happen. So these events, what I wanted to do was I wanted to set them up so they were nice and easy ones to be able to sort of tune and adjust and set up different things. So there's ones that can affect resources, so things like light, the amount of scrap. There's also ones that can affect shop prices, and that can also affect things like the delivery time and that as well. And then the big thing is lots of different ones for controlling things like the weather. And the weather, just like how the rest of the stuff I wanted to have, light intensity vary throughout the day, and that weather can also impact light intensity. So if you've got a really heavy storm, that will actually significantly reduce the amount of solar power that you're gaining. And so it sort of nicely feeds into vary the complexity and the difficulty as you're sort of going through the game, which is kind of one of the big things of having it. So there was some interesting variety happening there and things that can make it a little bit more challenging. So the weather system is set up using some of the processes that I've actually done a tutorial on. So it has presets that it can switch between. It's able to affect a bunch of things like the sky and that as well. So with light rain, there's a fairly minimal amount of clouds, but if the rain was sort of really heavy, we'd actually have very dark, dense clouds. The time of day stuff has also been tweaked as well. So we've got not just a sun, but there is also a moon in the system as well. So we can see we have sun and moon that are slowly rotating. Each of those is 180 degrees apart, so they're directly opposite each other. So that allowed me to have a little bit more light there at nighttime, because that was getting a little dark. There's also some automatic things I've added in for adjusting light intensity of the screens that are here in the carriage. Those will actually change, so at night it dims them, just because the level of variation in terms of light intensity that was happening was so much that it was actually becoming a little bit blinding. So it was a little bit difficult to actually sort of see there. So I wanted to improve that. So that side of things is working quite nicely. And if I actually go in and we're going to switch the time of day, in terms of with the day length, actually, while we're in the time of day thing, the season varies the day length as well. So that natural sort of variation that we would see in how long a day is during different seasons, that will actually happen in the game. And so it can vary the day length by up to an hour either way. So not a huge amount of change, but it means the days can shrink by 2 hours, or they can also expand by 2 hours. And what we ran into here is actually an intentional thing where I started trying, the faster we try to go, the more power it actually uses. But because I started at night, well, not at night, but near sunset, I very quickly ran out of power and we had to stop. But it gives us a chance to actually see there's these little bits of sort of emergency safety lights that we have, just because, especially with my general lack of coordination often, it was quite tricky at times navigating at night. Now it is tied into when you've got railings, so it means the installing of that railings upgrade actually has a bit more of a benefit than just going and making it less likely for you to be falling off of the train. It actually makes it, especially at night, quite a bit safer. Because you can see at night it's a lot more difficult to actually judge, and if I get it wrong like that, then I get returned back to the main screen. So we've got time of day, we've got weather, we've got things like of that running quite happily in it, which is really good. And I'll adjust the time of day back. So we're back to in the morning. So in terms of the remaining sort of things, the two big remaining things are adding in sound effects, which is a pretty straightforward thing. So there's a lot of sound effects I'm going to need to source. There's a lot of sourcing of those and integrating them into the game. That's one of the big remaining things. And also the save load system, because the game now supports different play styles, essentially, or different play modes. I haven't figured out exactly what sort of terminology I want to use for presenting it to the user yet, but essentially you'll have 3 different modes that you can play the game in. The balanced default mode, which that mode is going to be a longer play session to hit the end point of retirement. And then there will also be a, basically a stretched out mode for if you just want to spend a really large amount of time just chilling on the train. And there will also be a fast mode. And what those modes adjust is some of the stuff in terms of the areas that will cause potential delays. So with the faster modes, you start with a larger amount of scrap to begin with. And you also, the scrap counts for more, and the energy, the amount of solar energy you gain, is quite a bit larger. So if we take a look at the different play modes, or the presets, so with fast mode, you start out with a very large amount of scrap. The scrap cost per unit is actually reduced, so prices of everything is a little bit cheaper. Purchase time is also made faster, just so you're not waiting around as long. And you gain double the solar energy, and everything in terms of scrap weighs twice as much. Stuff like of the default mode slows it down a bit more, and then the slow version quite a bit more. So you start out with a lot less, so you're not going to be able to purchase as much for a while, and the solar irradiance and everything is much lower. So it means that you need to balance things more carefully. So the idea is in the fast mode, you don't need to worry as much about balancing the sort of different options there in terms of, okay, which carriage do I upgrade first? What order do I upgrade them in? What should I purchase next? Is less of a consideration in the fast mode intentionally. So slow mode is where that has to be a very important consideration, and it's a very critical thing to consider. Whereas the default mode, it's important, but it's not a, it's something where you will run into the limits, but not as easily as you would in like of the slow mode. So that stuff is running there, and the save load system is going to sort of tie in alongside this. So it's going to need to remember things like your preset and also the setup for the train. which that's actually pretty straightforward. The information needed to be saved there is quite minimal. File format wise, I'm going to use something just very easy for people to edit if they're wanting to, like JSON. It's kind of thing where there's no point in most cases, and especially in this case, with making the content of the save games secret. So if you want to go in and modify stuff, you'll be able to do that. I'll probably also put in a basic autosave system as well. So sound effects and that save load system are probably the two biggest remaining things. But I'm still, I think, and hopefully won't make a liar of myself with this one, I think it's going to be all finished in June. That's certainly the goal with it, is having it all up and running and completed in June. And yeah, it has ballooned out it ended up being a much larger project than expected. And I think a good indication of that is things that I've developed in this have turned into something like 8 or even more tutorial videos, just because of the amount of different things. I've learned a lot of cool new things from it. I have learned a lot of cool things that I was then able to be sharing with people, which has been great. And that's part of the reason why I make the small games, is partly because it's ideas of things that I want to make that are really ironic saying this after this one's being developed in a large period of time. They're ones that are fairly small and easy to make. This one hasn't been, but it gives me a lot of ideas of things that I can do tutorials on and come up with new things. So this has been really great for doing that. Future ones I'm going to return back to for a bit, making them much smaller in scale. So I'll probably return to what I did for a while when I was made a series of 12 games, where the game itself, I have to finish making it in a total period of 20 hours, and then I get an additional 4 hours to do polishing. So it's not 24 hours in one block, because that's terrible dev practices and not good for your health. Don't do that. That's horrible crunch to put yourself through, so never do that. But it'll be over a course of a few weeks. And I think that will be a much sort of better setup. So I've got ideas of what I'm thinking of for that. I want to probably do something based upon the latest Global Game Jam themes, the one for this year, which was Duality from memory. So I'm thinking about ideas with that and trying to enforce making them very small in scale. It's kind of nice to do larger games like this at times, but it's also good to have a bit of a return to things that are a bit smaller, a bit more manageable. So this will probably be the last developer diary for Eternal Collector. There might be another one once I have things like the safe load system going, but this is possibly going to be the last one before actually launching the game, which is cool. I'm looking forward to having the game out there and people getting to check it out, and hopefully just have a fun, chill time listening to the various music that I've sourced for it, while collecting a bunch of scrap. So until next time, bye.